Hi, everyone. We have author Rita Woods here, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself.
My name is Rita Woods, and I live in suburban Chicago. I'm about 35 miles outside of the main city. Um, my debut novel, Remembrance, came out in January of this year. I have a day job. I'm a physician. I'm the medical director of a big medical center that services one of the largest labor unions in the United States. So I do that during the day. And then when I have time in my spare time, I write novels. Two kids, and I'm raising my 8-year-old granddaughter. So that's what my life looks like.
And are you self-published?
I'm not. I
Okay.
actually have I was published through Forge, which is a imprint from Macmillan. So
Okay.
one of the big five, big four now, since there was that big acquisition. So no, I'm not self-published.
Okay. And what inspired you to start writing?
Yeah, I always wanted to be a writer, always from the time I could even pick up a pencil. Um, and I wrote really horrible poetry when I was a little kid and wrote all through high school. And I wanted to be a writer, but my parents were very traditional, old fashioned. They wanted me to get a job with benefits, health insurance, life insurance, paid vacations. And, when you're a writer, that's not the life. And I was a really super shy kid. So I wasn't strong enough to say, or confident enough to say, really, no, I want to be a writer. That's the life I want to live. I was like, okay. So I went to medical school. And of course, I was naive enough. My parents were, well, you can write in your spare time. Okay. Well, that wasn't true. But I never really lost the love of that. It was always kind of percolating in the background that this is what I wanted to do. This is the thing that gave me life. So I was always writing a little bit. And then I ran into someone. I was actually a lobbyist on the Hill for a while. And I ran into someone who only knew me as a writer. And they would always come up and say, so what are you writing? And I realized I hadn't written anything except, documents and things like that in years. And it just wounded me. And I thought, I need to get back to that. So that was kind of the catalyst that made me realize, once a writer, always a writer, hopefully. And hopefully you don't lose that totally, but it's hard. And you have to have a certain kind of background and courage to pursue that as a real life.
Yes.
So
Okay. And tell us about your book.
So Remembrance is, self-promotion. So Remembrance is a historical fiction that is actually has a lot of magical realism in it. And it takes place over 3 centuries. It follows the life of 4 women starting in 1791, which is just before the Haitian Revolution, just on the cusp of the Haitian Revolution, follows all the way through the Civil War and into the 21st century. And it centers around a woman named Mother Abigail, who is a Haitian priestess, voodoo priestess, escaped Haiti at the turn of the revolution, ended up in the United States in New Orleans, learned some of our traditional religions and powers, and uses her powers to create a parallel universe that is a stop on the Underground Railroad.
And did you experience any type of writer's block?
You know, I don't know if I'd call it writer's block, but it's more a sense of when you start writing. I don't know if you have this experience, but you think you know the story you're going to tell, and it just is not happening on the page. So you can keep writing, but it isn't what you thought. It's not the story you thought you were going to tell. And there's two things that happen for me anyway. The first is you fight it. You're like, no, this is I have this story. It's clear in my head. This is the story we're going to tell. But then when you, at least in my experience, when you look at that, it's horrible. It's just because you're forcing it. So then you have to step back and go, okay, I don't really know where we're going with this, but let me just go with it and see what happens. So it wasn't writer's block as in I couldn't write so much as I couldn't write what I thought was the story.
Okay. And tell us, how did you come up with the title and the cover?
The title was kind of you know, an homage to the fact that, you know, for our history, for history as Black people, people of color, a lot of times we don't remember. You know, we can go back one or two or three generations, and then there's just kind of this open space where we don't know, and or it's intentional. What was in our past is so horrific and so fills us with such despair that we just don't want to remember. So it was kind of a twofold thing. I wanted to be able to say this place, which is called Remembrance, is a safe space for those memories. And if you want to share, you can. If you don't, if you want to bury them, you can do that. But there is a space, a physical space for memories.
Okay.
So that's where I came up with the title. The cover was actually kind of a collaboration between my publisher and myself. My editor actually, I've been so lucky with my publishing house and my editor. She actually called and said, "Tell me what you hate. What do you absolutely not want to see on your book?" And, you know, so I gave her a list of, I didn't want it to look modern, nothing wrong with modern, but it's not a modern story. So I didn't want it to look modern. Um, I wanted it to look kind of very sepia, like turn of the century photograph kind of look. And I mean, she went as far as what's your favorite colors and who are your favorite artists. And so I gave her that list, and then she gave it to a cover artist. And actually, this was the very first cover that they came up with. And I just loved it. So we went with it.
Okay. And how long did it take you to finish the book?
So it took it took about 2.5 years to finish the book. When the book sold, publishing, as you know, is a long, really slow, painful process. So the book actually sold 2 years ago. But once it's sold, they basically said, okay, so we're going to take all the chapters and rearrange them. We want you to add two or three more characters and change the ending a little bit. So even though the book was finished, it wasn't finished.
Okay.
So there was another sort of 3 or 4 months worth of frantic rewriting. And then they have the whole copy editing thing, which is just brutal, where they'll ask you, are you sure that yellow flowers grow in the Mississippi in February? No, no, I'm not. And that's not the point. But that's how finite they get it drilled down into the detail.
Okay. And tell us where we can purchase your book.
So you can purchase it online anywhere at Amazon or any of the Barnes and Noble. I always tell people that my personal preference is that if you know an indie bookstore, that would be my preference. I don't know what's in New Jersey, but there's a few Black female owned indie bookstores that I'm aware. There's Harriet's in Philly. There's Brain Layer in South Bend. Here in Chicago, there's Semicolon. So you can purchase it anywhere.
Yes, we have Source of Knowledge bookstore in Newark, New Jersey.
Is that Black owned?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And tell
So
us.
purchase it there. Go there.
Absolutely. It's my favorite bookstore. Do you have a favorite character in your book?
I have a couple, and it varies. So I like the character Josiah. Everyone always is asking about him. You know, what is he? Who is he? He's and then from my perspective, he's not human. He's kind of a familiar. He is sort of a minor god, like in Haitian tradition, you call him Loa. Okay. So he has been tasked with finding women through the centuries that will be caretakers for the current generation of people of color. I like all the women, obviously, but I know this is going to sound very strange. One of my favorite characters is actually a minor character. He's the little white boy named Dix. because he's just so confused. You know, he has this preconceived notion about what Black people are like, what slaves are like, what their lives are like. And he's not a bad person. And I think um, once put into a situation, he's able to see people as people. And I think there's kind of a lesson in that for all of us anyway. Not that I was trying to do a lesson, but I'm able to identify with being able to change your whole worldview and redeem yourself. You did these horrible things out of ignorance, and you're able to redeem yourself in the end. So he's one of my favorite characters.
Okay. And that's usually how it is. You know, people are afraid, or, you know, they don't like what they don't know about, they don't have knowledge about. So that's usually how it goes. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. This is what, you know, Black folks are like. This is what they do. This is, and the reality is you don't even know any Black folks.
Mm-hmm.
So your whole experience is based on they said, whoever they are, they said, and what you're seeing on television, which is you only put the sexy things in the media. You're not gonna, it's not sexy to talk about a single mom who gets her kid to ballet class, or, you know, a dad who's, you know, a Black father who's coaching softball. That's not an interesting story. It's much more interesting. I don't know if you saw that here in Chicago, the Black guy who was riding his horse down the middle of the interstate. You know, so
I missed that one.
you missed that one. Yeah,
Yeah.
he was protesting, so he got a horse and he was rode his horse for 7 miles down I-94.
Wow.
And of course, that got major
Of
coverage,
course.
you know,
Of
because
course.
that's
Yes.
peculiar and odd. And
Uh-huh. Yep. Okay. So tell us where we can find you on social media.
so I am on Facebook. You can find my website is ritawoodswrites.com. Rita Woods 723 is my IG handle. And Rita Woods author is where you can find me on Twitter.
All right. And are you working on a second book?
I am. I just signed another 2-book deal with Macmillan, and I am in revisions of another book called The Last Dreamwalker, and it's about a woman who is estranged from her mother but realizes that she has connections to the Gullah Geechee Nation. And that has been passed down to her from slavery times, and she can use that power to defend her family's property there.
Wow. Tell us, what do you hope that readers take away from reading your book?
So one of the issues that I had sometimes when you're reading is there's kind of these tropes for Black literature. I don't write urban, which is fine. I think there's a wonderful place for that. But there's also, we have such a rich history. And the problem that I have with some books that are written is there's always kind of the white savior, or we're the victims that we just overcame. And every time I write something, I want it to convey that we overcame. People did horrific things to us as a people, but we saved ourselves in many, many instances, and we persevered. But I also, because I write historical, even within the parameters of saying they're magical realism, they're fantasy, I want people to be curious about the history that I write about. So certainly in Remembrance, the Haitian Revolution is there, the history of New Orleans, which is a very strange, crazy, bizarre, chaotic history, which is why New Orleans is a crazy, strange, chaotic place. Sort of the history of voodoo, which is not sticking pins in dolls. That is not the true history of voodoo. So I want people to know about that. I want to present it in a way that's like people might get interested. In the current book, I'm always surprised at how many people don't even know about the Gullah Geechee Nation. And even though that's not what the book is about per se, I want to kind of at least familiarity out there, like, oh, you know, because we have such an amazing history, you know, and it's not all about we were slaves and then we weren't, and then we were lynched, and then there were civil rights, and then here we are. No, our history is so much richer than that.
Absolutely. And how do you think being a writer has helped you as a person?
I think it's almost therapeutic for me. Um, as a doctor, we absorb all these stories. Everyone's always surprised, but we basically are storytellers. People come to us and they give us what we call info dumps. Like there's all this, da, 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 and somehow we're supposed to put that together and say, well, you know what you have. And so part of our training is we get all this information and we have to put it into a story that makes sense. Okay, so this started then, and then this happened, and this happened. Oh, let me tell you what's happening. Um, and as a writer, you absorb all of these facts that are so fascinating and so interesting. And there's a little bit of frustration, like I want to get that back out there. There's all these stories. You're always thinking, ooh, what if? When people talk, when you see people, when you see the crazy lady with the blue lipstick at the bus stop, it's like, oh yeah, there's a story there. I don't know what it is, but there's a story there. And so I hope that what it's done is make me a little bit more empathetic and certainly curious.
Okay. And that could work both ways, right? It can make your readers be more empathetic as well.
Hopefully, that's a big ask, but hopefully, even if it's just a little bit.
Is there anything else that you would like to tell us about your book?
It comes out in paperback in January.
Okay.
And it just won the NPR book of 2020, and it was and I got the African American Historical Literature Award, so that was really cool. So if you want to wait until after the holidays, it does come out in paperback.
Get it for the holidays.
Or get it for the holidays.
Somebody's stocking. Merry Christmas.
And if you go onto my social media, one of the things that I tried to do was support like Haitian NGOs. And so there's some pairings where it's like, if you get the book, you can also get some coffee from Singing Rooster, which is a small organization that's trying to support and reestablish coffee making in Haiti.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Kia. This was fun.
All right, everyone. That was author Rita Woods telling us about her book. Make sure you go out and purchase a copy. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this video below. Bye.